around the 9th anniversary of the deaths of my Iraqi staff, I went seriously downhill. Some days I was just bedridden with depression. I just couldn't get out of bed.
Correct. Vanderbilt Ford Route 23.
Baghdad, 2007.
That's a weapon.
A photographer and a driver working for Reuters bureau chief Dean Yates died in an attack from a U.S. Apache helicopter. This footage was later made public by WikiLeaks.
This is Crazy Horse 1-8. Have individuals with weapons.
I was in our office when all of a sudden I could just hear this shrieking from outside. And I knew instantly that something bad had happened.
You're clear.
All right, firing.
Line here. Let the state line out.
Let me know when you gather.
What's you? Light them all up.
Come on, fire.
They're right.
He burst into the office and he was wailing, and I asked someone to translate for me what he was saying, and he was basically saying Namir and Said have been killed. It was the worst. I just remember how I felt at that time. It was just like, this can't be happening.
Years later, the deeper effect of that event and other events from Dean's long career in journalism emerged.
I just started to think and ruminate about their deaths and how I felt that there was a lot more that I could have done.
That led to depression and ultimately to an unexpected diagnosis in March 2016 of post-traumatic stress disorder.
I just thought, well, why would I have PTSD when other journalists who've been in much more difficult situations than I've been, they're the ones who get PTSD. It's the people who are on the front lines. It's the people who are getting shot at all the time, or the journalists who were there who got kidnapped, or the journalists who nearly got blown up. That never happened to me. And so I just thought, no, you can't have PTSD. You don't warrant that diagnosis. It's cumulative trauma, that all these things that you've covered over the years have resulted in cumulative trauma. And that Bali bombings, the tsunami in Aceh, those things softened me up to the point where by the time I was the bureau chief in Iraq and lost staff, I was already vulnerable, and that those events just all came together.
In August 2016, Dean spent 5 weeks in Ward 17, a facility run by Austin Health in Melbourne and usually home to Australian military veterans and first responders.
I remember the first time I came to this treatment room and I sat down on this chair and my anxiety levels were just absolutely going through the roof, and I was just sitting here, my legs were going like jackhammers. It was a pretty terrifying moment, to be honest, because I had just entered a psychiatric unit. So that was the best thing I could have done coming here.
The treatment helped Dean accept his illness and his own particular moral injury, the mental fallout from a situation where you feel you failed to uphold your moral principles.
You feel this unrelenting guilt and shame. You feel culpable. And one of the problems is that very few people understand moral injury. And the first thing people do when you explain what happened is that they will say, don't blame yourself. You did everything you could. You're a good person. You need to move on from it. But you still feel the way you feel.
A year later, and 10 years on from the death of his staff in Baghdad, Dean returned to Ward 17. By his side was Kath Slarks, one of Austin Health's spiritual care workers, who'd helped him plan a very personal remembrance service.
It's time for me to express my sorrow, to ask forgiveness from Namir and Said and their families, and to then try to heal from this ceremony and make real meaning out of my life, to integrate this whole experience, this 10 years, into being a better person.
And that meant apologizing to his photographer colleague for implying he shared in the blame.
Namir, I just can't understand why I was thinking like this. They were going to attack whether you peered around that corner or not. For me, 9 years later, and at the time, to have blamed you is beyond comprehension. But I have done you, your good name, and your family an enormous disservice to ever suggest that you were to blame in any way for that attack. They had been given clearance to shoot. I am so very sorry for this, Namir. What I thought and what I wrote 9 years later was inexcusable.
In early 2018, Dean went back to Ward 17, this time to thank those who'd helped him and to reflect on his journey. He sometimes struggles with PTSD symptoms like anxiety, and he's still easily startled by unexpected loud noises, but his nightmares and flashbacks have largely stopped. More significantly, he no longer feels the crushing weight of moral injury that stemmed from the deaths of his Iraqi staff, Namir and Saeed.
I knew I needed to heal, but I didn't know how. And I think it was that process of writing that long letter to them that really got to the bottom of my moral injury and helped me understand it fully. And it was during that ceremony that I literally felt that guilt and shame lift off my shoulders. I literally felt that I'd reached a point where I could forgive myself